Coming up, the Sky News Daily. All you need to know about one story in the news in 20 minutes. Today, Elon Musk and Donald Trump's plans to get America making babies. And if you like what you're hearing, do make sure and give us a follow on your podcast app. Stay where you are.
In general, I think we should really view the birth rate as a extremely fundamental crisis. It's really shocking how low it is. The birth rate in America, in the United States, has been below replacement rate since I was born, roughly around 1971 or so.
I'm Niall Paterson. Welcome to The Daily. That, of course, was Elon Musk, tech billionaire, Donald Trump's soon-to-be government efficiency czar, and a proponent of what's known as pronatalism, an emerging movement in US politics that says Americans should be having more babies. And more than that it's their duty to do so. And it seems the next president agrees. Martha Kelner is our US correspondent, and she joins from Los Angeles. Martha, just explain exactly what pronatalism is.
Yeah, so pronatalism is also known as pro-birth. It's essentially a political and/or a personal ideology that says human reproduction is the key goal of humanity. So many of these pronatalists believe falling birth rates in certain developed countries, like the United States and most of Europe, will lead to the extinction of cultures, the breakdown of economies, and ultimately the collapse of civilization. So pronatalists believe having many children is not an individual choice, but a societal imperative. And so some of these people, and it is mainly the men that I've been speaking to, want women to be baby-making machines.
You said certain countries there. I mean, is declining birth rate a problem for the whole world?
Yeah, it depends where you look. So, for instance, it's true to say that in Japan, for example, the population peaked in 2010 and has been declining ever since. And that's why we always talk about Japan having an aging population. And it's something that policymakers there are worried about because it means you have more old people needing support and fewer working age people to support them. But across the world, that is simply not the case. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, the population's predicted to double between now and 2050. So demographers, who are the people who study populations, say that even if the birth rate does decrease, it will do so slowly. So we're not going to have this doomsday population collapse scenario that the pronatalists are talking about. And all that, I guess, opens up questions about which populations pronatalists are concerned about declining. Is it worldwide populations, or is it actually populations in so-called Western nations that they're worried about?
Which is it, Martha? Because ultimately it does sound a little bit like they're suggesting that white people of European descent should be having more babies.
Yeah, I think it does all of this give rise to a question about eugenics. For example, the reason I first came across the idea of pronatalism was when I was reading about a couple called Simone and Malcolm Collins, who are wealthy entrepreneurs. They live in Pennsylvania on the east coast of the United States. And they're kind of America's premier pronatalists, if you like. Malcolm Collins have 3 children at the moment. They hope to go on to have 7 children. When conceiving their youngest child, who is a girl named Titan Invictus, they went through genetic testing to do that and embryo selection to try and ensure that this child of theirs wouldn't become obese or suffer from anxiety when she grew up. But that is one of the reasons that pronatalism is so controversial, with some viewing it as a pathway to eugenics, a way to control not the population, but the characteristics of a population. And like you say, this idea that actually it's white, European, Western nations that, they want to preserve the population of.
What's the link then between this pronatalist movement and Silicon Valley, and very specifically, name we'll all recognise, Elon Musk, himself possessed of, I think it's 11 children?
Could well be more than 11 children, and most, if not all of those, conceived through IVF. So Elon Musk is by far the biggest figurehead for the pronatalism movement. But the link with Silicon Valley is really interesting. Silicon Valley's emerged as a key partner in this so-called new right in the United States. So this shift that the technology industry has had from being tied to the Democratic Party, now tied to the Republican Party. And pronatalism has strong links to another movement in Silicon Valley, which is called effective altruism, which, in the view of its proponents, uses evidence and reason to figure out how to benefit as many people as possible. This idea that our long-term future is the key moral priority. That's why you see Elon Musk's preoccupation with going to Mars, because he sees that as a way of safeguarding the future of civilization should some major devastating event happen. But pronatalism is something that's supported not just by Musk. For example, the co-founder of Skype, an Estonian billionaire called Jan Tallinn, he's donated $500,000 to a premier pronatalist foundation. A case I found really interesting was Pavel Durov, who is the Russian founder of Telegram, which is the communications platform. He said earlier this year that he's fathered more than 100 children through sperm donations he's made over the past 15 years. It's definitely a growing thing in Silicon Valley, this idea of pronatalism. I think what's interesting to consider is just what exactly informs it, because is it, this idea of safeguarding humanity, or is it this idea that some of those people within Silicon Valley believe that their genes, their intelligence is so important, so valuable, that it must be passed down to the next generation? And I think there's probably some truth in both.
All of which deeply concerns me, particularly when you look at, first and foremost, the closeness of the relationship between Elon Musk and the next president of the United States, Donald Trump, and the things that Elon Musk has said on his own social media platforms. Where does Elon Musk get his views from?
Yeah, these are deeply held views, and in many minds quite extreme views on population decline and pronatalism. I think Elon Musk has always had these views. I was obviously naturally interested in where those views have come from, and I think with all of our views, a lot of them are informed by our upbringing, our early environment. So naturally the first place to start was with Elon Musk's parents, and his father, Errol Musk. He lives just outside Cape Town in South Africa. Errol Musk is a fascinating character. He's a retired engineer. He himself is father to 7 children, and he has very interesting views on lots of things, but also on pronatalism.
I think it should be a concern for any thinking person. And if you're an industrialized country and your country is dependent on the labor of your people and all that sort of thing, then, it's serious thing to be concerned about. It's not about not liking this group or liking that group. It's just the facts. So what Elon is more or less, I suppose, or people like him are saying is the countries like Germany and Russia and England and France and so on need to at least maintain their populations.
Elon once told a biographer, if each successive generation of smart people has fewer kids, then that's probably bad. Is he talking about eugenics there? Are we talking about specific characteristics that we're looking for in terms of addressing population decline?
One need only go to England and go to Cheltenham area, horse breeding area, and say, look, we're not going to breed the horses anymore by any form of standard. I've got a few old horses I found in Nigeria. We're going to bus them over or ship them over to you, and we're going to just mix them with your racehorses. Because if you did that, there would be no more thoroughbred racehorses available in England. They would all be gone. So what Elon is saying is just common sense. Humans are not animals, but let's say, as with dogs and horses particularly, and so on, breeding and selective breeding is essential if you expect to get anywhere. I wouldn't call it eugenics as such, but every nation has practiced a certain form of survival of the fittest, But if you get to a country where people breed indiscriminately, then, sicknesses are rife, they're not particularly good, at what they do. So it's a difficult subject, and a lot of people would pick me out. But at the end of the day, what I'm saying is true.
Do you think Elon's pro-family beliefs will impact the Trump administration and how it operates?
Yes. I mean, Elon, it doesn't try to push his opinion across. He will give his opinion. If they completely ignore his opinion, because he's a little bit, my son is a little bit of he's always been a little bit of a machine. And, as a person, he's very machine-like, it's black or it's white, But if he gives his advice, he will give it straight, and he will expect them to take note of it, or give him a good reason why they're not acting on his advice.
Do you think Elon, through the government, will want to encourage people to have more children?
He would encourage people to have families. There have always been programs that have provided funds, even in this country, for people with children. So they get grants for children. So, yeah, I can see him encouraging having that idea that either you get tax exemptions or you can receive benefits because you added to the state's value, because human individuals are the value of the state. That is how you value the state. Each one is an asset of the state.
Errol, is that idea of reproducing, of pronatalism, something that you've always discussed with Elon, something that's always been a matter of utmost importance to him?
Because we are academic sort of people and technical people, we would have spoken about that kind of thing constantly. So yes, we are people who certainly subscribe to having children and increasing the numbers of our community. Obviously, it's what we're here for. The whole object of life is to keep going. One of the things I learned very early on going to America, and I remember people telling me in the 70s that people aim at having just one child because of the fear of the cost of raising the child. We didn't worry about that so much here in this country. But I remember that already being a real issue for people there as long ago as 50 years ago.
Okay, quite where to begin with that, Martha. When Errol Musk says something like, I wouldn't call it eugenics as such, selective breeding is essential. Well, he might not call it eugenics. I suspect plenty of other people would.
Yeah, I think clearly some of that is very concerning. The idea of comparing human reproduction to the Cheltenham horse sales, and this idea that there are countries where people are smarter than in other countries. I mean, that is the very definition of eugenics. It is, similar to what we've heard Elon Musk say before, this quote that he gave to a biographer quite a few years ago. But he's not disavowed himself of that comment. But he said, if people in smart nations don't continue reproducing, then we're in trouble. That is concerning, especially given how vocal a voice Elon Musk now has in the future Trump administration.
I mean, clearly Donald Trump is a big supporter. He's promised to be giving, free IVF to couples that want it. What's the attraction to pronatalism for Trump?
I think in terms of what he was saying on the election trail, it is about getting votes. During his campaign, Trump told crowds that he'd provide free IVF to all couples who wanted and needed it if he was re-elected. That is a huge promise to make.
I imagine, though, given the cost of IVF clinics across America are preparing for a potential influx of clients and indeed of money. You went to one in California.
Yeah, so California is the state which has the most out of any fertility clinics in the country, 92 fertility clinics. There's so much demand there that doctors can't be trained fast enough to offer this service. And they are expecting a major boost in the numbers of patients through their doors. I went to visit the Fertility Institute in Los Angeles, which is in a place called Encino in the Valley in LA. And a man called Dr. Jeffrey Steinberg, who runs that clinic. He's perhaps the most established person in California in the field of IVF. And he was taking what Trump has promised at face value. He thinks Trump is going to follow through on his promise to provide free IVF to all couples, which would completely transform this industry. It's already worth more than $1 billion a year. It would see that figure skyrocket.
Dr. Steinberg offers more than just basic in vitro fertilization, I'd say.
A lot of his patients come from outside the United States because a lot of what he offers in his clinic is illegal in much of the world. So he offers not only gender selection, but also eye colour selection. So if a couple goes in there and they say, oh, we've got a couple of kids already, they've got, brown eyes or hazel eyes, we'd actually like some blue-eyed babies next. Well, Dr. Steinberg, in over 90% of cases, can guarantee that couple blue-eyed babies if that is what they so desire. And he's looking to take it even further. So at the moment, he said to me within 3 to 5 years, he thinks he will be able to offer hair colour selection. So if you want a brown-haired baby or a blonde-haired baby, for example, you will be able to go into Dr. Steinberg's clinic and be able to select that. It's almost like designer babies in the truest sense of the word.
Donald Trump, for better or for worse, tends to keep his word. And the sort of the poo-pooing of what he was saying, I think, has vanished because they're realizing that it's probably going to happen. So all the fertility centers are gearing up for a huge surge. And the numbers don't lie. Declining birth rates have affected every country. It's an international problem. And I think he's totally correct in understanding that it is a huge threat. We offer gender selection sort of as a routine. We've incorporated genetic evaluation into the standard procedures. Mm-hmm. So certainly people can elect not to have it, but only about 5% of our patients do so. In the process of discussing gender selection, they say, oh, by the way, can you do hair color? Oh, by the way, can you do eye color? It's like plastic surgery. I mean, no one's going to die from a nose that's too big or too small. And no one's going to die from having a green-eyed or a blue-eyed or a brown-eyed baby, but it's an option that people like. We make people happy, and that's the whole goal here.
What do you say to people that there's a moral issue with selecting babies' eye colour, hair colour?
I think it's no more moral issue than someone wanting to change the shape of their nose or change the shape of their ears. It has nothing to do with morality. It's simply a cosmetic feature. It's available. It doesn't do any harm. It's very, very safe. And in fact, it improves pregnancy rates because we don't just do eye color. Along with that, we're checking the genetics of the embryo to make sure that it's healthy. There's nothing better that you could do than take couples that are unable to have children and allow them to have children if you're worried about birth rates. There's a lot of infertility in the world, maybe 20% of couples. Mm-hmm. So if you could suddenly, over the next 10 years or 15 years, increase the birth rate by 20%, that's a huge step forward. Mm-hmm. And I think it's nothing but benefit in that.
Mm-hmm. Is Musk looking for a specific type of person to be reproducing?
I think sociologically that would be an error to say, let's just breed intelligent people, because intelligence doesn't necessarily fulfill the needs of society. I mean, I debate with the ethicists, and some of them say okay, and some of them say not okay. Mm-hmm. So there's no consensus. I guess maybe over the next 50 or 100 years, a consensus will develop. Mm-hmm. But again, they keep talking about the slippery slope, but we haven't slipped yet.
I'm certainly not going to suggest that everyone who's pro-natalist is in some form a white supremacist, but it does seem that the Venn diagram overlaps quite considerably between those two groups. The 14 words as they're known that the white supremacist movement have at their core: we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. I mean, what better way to do that than this?
I think that's why you see a lot of the, Silicon Valley investors in these fertility movements called, proponents of hipster eugenics, because there is definitely an overlap between the two. And if you are to, be cynical about it, you have to look at what they're saying, a lot of what they're saying, and think that, they aren't interested in population collapse as a whole. It's more about population collapse of people with certain characteristics.
And that's your lot for this edition of The Daily. To see Martha Kelner's reporting from the United States, just head to skynews.com. We're back again tomorrow.